All right, welcome everyone to today's Environmental Stewardship Committee meeting. I just am going to start by starting with a land acknowledgement that the University of Washington acknowledges the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. And then I'm going to turn it to our chair for today, John Schaffelberger.
Okay, thank you, Damon. I want to welcome you all this morning and thank you for joining us at this meeting. This will be our final meeting of this academic year, and we will resume our meetings in the fall quarter. Today, we're going to discuss the draft actions proposed by the proponents for the 10 actions to be included in the FY22 Sustainability Action Plan. We have a lot to talk about, and we have allocated 7 minutes for each one of these actions. And so if you have comments, we really want your comments, but either put them in the chat, or if you think about them after this meeting is over, please go ahead and send them to Claudia. And with that, I think I want to turn over to Lou, who's going to share the welcome this morning.
Well, thank you, John, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I see we've got 32 people on the call today. I think that's most of us, but appreciate everyone joining. We've got a packed agenda, 7 minutes for 10 different items. So we'll rifle through it, but we're at an exciting time, having finished a year with our FY21 action plans, making progress, and here we're going to chart the course for the next year and hear from each of the groups. But before we go into target number 1, I wanted to spend just a minute to acknowledge a pretty special award that has been bestowed upon our beloved co-chairman, John Schaffelberger. He received the 2021 Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Associated Schools of Construction. And this was last month in April. He was given the award at their annual conference. But it's just great for John, of course, a capstone to his wonderful career. He's been at UW since 1994. Prior to that, spent 30 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, and he's been involved in construction his whole life and contributing great things. Here at UW since '94, he's been the chair of the Department of Construction Management for about 12 years. He was the dean of our College of Built Environments until recently. Did that for 7 years, and he served on the faculty senate here at UW for about 15 years throughout his time with the university. And this is just a wonderful award and well-deserved, and it's an honor. John, I appreciate the association that I've had personally with you for the last 3 years, and appreciate your mentorship and your advice getting me started here. But this is no surprise to any of us, and we're really just thrilled that you were given this great honor as a Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Associated Schools of Construction. So congratulations.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, I apologize. We had a little bit of an echo there, but thank you for muting. John, I know you don't want any more spotlight on you. That's just a testament to your character. But again, thank you for the incredible contributions. You've touched so many lives and made tremendous impact. And we're all proud of you and proud of our association with you. You've represented UW well and the industry very well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right, so Claudia, let's go ahead and get started. I think, do we start out with action owner for target number 1?
That's right, Lou. So we're going to have Torin take it away, and questions, please email them to me, or quick things on the chat box. We're going to do timekeeping. Thank you.
Awesome. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So thank you everybody for being here today and for listening to our draft actions. So I am heading up the Target 1 group, which is about engagement, doubling staff, student, and faculty sustainability engagement by 2024. On the team with me is members from the Lauren Brohan from the EIC. I wanted to say ESC, from the EIC. Lauren Updike from the Whole U, and then members from UW Tacoma and UW Bothell as well. So first, I wanted to start off talking about some of our accomplishments from FY 2021. We were looking at the guiding principles and noticed that the DEI principle wasn't really woven through our work at this point. So we hired a DEI coordinator to support our office, the CSF, and the Sustainability Action Plan. So we're excited to have her on board and kind of help us really hone in on that guiding principle. We started tracking events and participation in sustainability and DEI related events. I think that in the previous meeting, I had shared the spreadsheet that we've put together. So each time we have an event or some sort of outreach, we write down how many people attended and sort of what type of event it was, just so that we have kind of a baseline metric. And then we also worked with a student intern to develop an outreach strategy and help kind of define engagement and our path moving forward. So some of the draft actions for FY22 would be to continue to work with the Whole U with regard to quarterly seminars and sustainability outreach. And then revamping our green certification programs to be more hands-on and kind of have a more than kind of a monthly component rather than just a recertification each year. So really sort of focus on engagement with the green certification program. And then also we would love to connect with more underrepresented groups and really sort of make them kind of a guide for our work moving forward. In terms of expanding professional development, I would love to hear feedback from the group on this. We would like to identify an incentive for staff and faculty who attend sustainability or DEI related events. Not quite sure what that would look like yet. So I would love to hear thoughts that you all have. And then set up some sort of tracking system for DEI related work, trainings, and classes as well. And again, not quite sure what the logistics of that would be. So any feedback would be greatly appreciated. In terms of community engagement, inventorying sustainability and DEI related RSOs and kind of focusing engagement toward these groups. We have previously implemented a green dog certification, which certifies RSOs. So sort of taking that and seeing kind of which of those sustainability related groups have that certification, and then seeing which ones don't and kind of comparing those and making sure that RSOs are aware of that certification. And then expanding community input across all 3 campuses and giving ample time to review and provide input. So an example would be developing an event calendar like up to a year in advance so that people can plan to attend events, workshops, classes, things like that. So with this generous sort of timeline, let's say within a year, that people can really kind of plan to come to an event, because one of the challenges that we had seen was that people were just oversaturated with being on Zoom and attending events. And so, they would say, well, I really was looking forward to going to this event, but, I didn't know about it because, it wasn't on my radar until 2 weeks ago. So kind of putting together a schedule for all the events so that people have time to plan. And then something positive that we had seen over the past year, and something that we hope to kind of continue for FY 2022 would be that on the commuter campuses, Bothell and Tacoma, we had seen higher participation in virtual events as opposed to in-person events, just due to logistics, timing of the events. And so more people were tuning into the events because they could do it in a virtual way rather than having to be on campus and kind of work their schedule around that. So that is kind of all I have for right now. I'm not sure how we are on time, but if Claudia, if people have questions, can they do questions? Okay, great. Let me see.
Yeah, we just have 1 minute, Lauren.
Okay. So our the graduate student DEI coordinator that we hired for the office, her name is Rashina Fountain, and she's fabulous. She's been with us for about 3 weeks. So we're kind of sort of just getting her up to speed on everything plan related. So hoping that she can be a great resource for us moving forward. And then if you think of questions too, like Claudia said, feel free to just send them either to Claudia or put them in the chat. Great. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat. Yes. Steve, I would love to connect with you on that. So Steve was curious about green office certification. So yeah, I'd love to give you the scoop.
All right, great presentation, Torrin. Again, anybody who has questions about Target 1, please just email us and we'd be happy to respond. However, we are out of time, so if we can move it on to targets 2 and 3, that'd be great. But again, thank you so much, Torrin. That was fantastic.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kalina.
Do you want me to dive in, Claudia? Or yeah, okay. Target 2. So our working team has representatives from Bothell, Tacoma, Earth Lab, Population Health, College of Built Environments, and Campus Sustainability Fund, Students Campus Sustainability Fund. And you'll see the first draft action is to finalize and publish the UW-wide definition of sustainability. So, our big accomplishment was to come up with a definition of sustainability and putting the link in the chat. ESC participated in creating this, and we I don't know if we want to. We'd like your formal blessing, and then Lou is planning to take this to Anamari and Board of Dean and Chancellors. Let me know, Lou, if I'm misspeaking at all. And a next step is to figure out where to publish it, and then work to engage the campus with it to get us to use it and grapple with it and understand sustainability better through that process. Kalina, go ahead and go back.
Just, I'm sorry to jump in, Marilyn. You're totally on board. I'm on board with what you just said. I'm going to try to leverage. I just got scheduled for June 16th with the Board of Deans and Chancellors on a separate issue that's not completely unrelated. And I think I can tie that to this, and I may just leverage another 3 minutes in that meeting to show this.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. And the next 2 draft actions are ones that they're carried over from before. We really wanted to have the definition in place so we could base the others on it. Actually, except I wanted to point out 1D, this idea of having a sustainability academic coordinator is still live, and we're hoping to ramp up that effort by creating a position description. And we've started conversations with Earth Lab about that position and where it will live and how to fund it. as I mentioned, the next two are carryovers. Then the final one, let's see, Kyle, are you on the call? Did you want to say a word or two about the Student Sustainability Hub?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. We've made some good progress on the Student Sustainability Hub work. We worked with the Program in the Environment Sustainability Studio 480 in winter quarter, and they came up with kind of a draft outline of what the hub could look like and incorporate. So there's 5 students working on that project. Bringing on Rashina is going to be really helpful in kind of helping with the next steps of that as well, and also really ensuring that we're approaching the work with inclusion and equity in mind. So the next steps are establishing a project team to be sponsored by the UW Sustainability Office. So really identifying who, not only identifying, but I guess coordinating the key stakeholders. I think we have a pretty good idea of who some of those may be, including ASUW, GPSS, Population Health Initiative, Earth Lab, and then some other student groups, the Ethnic Cultural Center and so forth. And then working with campus stakeholders to determine the scope, opportunities, and barriers. So, it's kind of like when the CSF started back in 2009. So really understanding, what are the needs in 2021. Sustainability looks a lot different than it did in 2009. So really kind of figuring out what are the needs currently, what are the opportunities, what are the barriers, and then publishing that final feasibility report. That was one of our goals for this year. I think we've realized that the inclusion work will take a little bit more time, and we want to make sure that we're thorough with that process and really understanding what the needs are. So we have that as a goal going into FY22. And I think I was just going to mention one other thing. We did put in a request with our services and activities fee funding for FY22 for some student kind of like small stipends for student leader positions for the hub. We're waiting to hear back on that. And then the other piece, sorry, I just skipped my mind. What was I going to mention? Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. But so that's the update on the hub. The other piece I was going to mention, just bringing it back to the space. So with the UW Sustainability Office kind of eminently moving to the UW Tower, the Campus Sustainability Fund and that hub is going to be really of utmost importance to have a location that's more centrally located and accessible to students. So we're currently looking at a place like the hub, so the physical hub on campus, so as opposed to a conceptual hub, but having the hub in the hub, or a place like Mary Gates Hall, somewhere where students could stumble upon, whereas the tower isn't a place that students are really going to stumble upon. So we're hoping to identify a location as part of our one of our main goals for FY22.
I just quickly want to add, really want to thank the Campus Sustainability Fund for really spearheading this. As we know, students are, I think, one of the real needed resource for students as they come and they go and have to carry and pass forward their prior work, is this kind of a place where they can pass on that information. And so I really want to thank the Campus Sustainability Fund, not to be biased here, but just that need is kind of there, and they've really just kind of taken that torch to continue shedding that light on what is it that students would be most benefiting from having a kind of a standing place to go. So I just want to give Kyle a shout out and the Campus Sustainability Fund. So, and Bruce, I think did you have any comment? Okay. Oh, he was just waving. Okay. So, thank you.
Marilyn and Kyle, is that the end of target 2, or are we moving to target 3?
Any quick questions or comments, I guess, or do we have time for that after?
We do have time. Our target 3 has been really kind of accompanying target 2 in the definition work. So not a whole lot there that needs discussion. So I think it might be a good time to actually just talk about either the hub or the definition.
Yeah, any thoughts or anyone that's like, yes, we need this? Okay, well, if you have ideas that okay, I see Jen weighing in. Yes, awesome. Yeah, it's funny, you know, the ESC is such a watering hole for sustainability things. I just emailed Jan and was like, no, I haven't, you know, we haven't crossed paths in such a long time, and so it's great to. Jan.
Sure. Yeah, great to see you. 2 thumbs up, Kyle. CSF's doing a great job, and it would you're right. It would be great to have, and it really important, frankly, to have a physical space to manifest the work. So that's an excellent idea.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, and I could see it, you know, UW Solar being a part of a space like that, having, you know, kind of the interaction between student groups being really powerful.
I'm going to show the target 3 here. If Marilyn, if you wanted to touch on this real quickly, and then we might be able to move forward.
This is pretty much continuing what we had listed last year. The idea being that these are kind of based on coming up with the definition. So we hope to dig into these more this year. Plan to, I should say. I'm wanting to keep this short partly because if anything, I'm hoping to use any extra time to talk about target 10.
Okay, well, should we go ahead and move on to target 4 then? I think, is that Claudia Christensen is presenting?
And Monica Acevedo Soto, both. Yep.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I can go ahead and get started. So again, target 4, comprehensive equitable purchasing targets by 2022. And the target actions listed were to increase student engagement with procurement services and aligning purchasing with business diversity and equity targets. So the first draft action, we had some feedback that we needed more clarity on what the student engagement meant here. And so we've involved 2 student interns on projects related to gauging campus awareness related to supplier diversity. Our goal is to establish at least 2 outreach visits per month to campus departments to discuss diversity. And here we're going to be supporting them by reviewing their purchasing, discussing any planned purchases that they have so we can get ahead of the goal. And also to just educate a little bit more on what available supplier vendors are in our database and what contracts are available. The second piece of that is continuing our partnership with Foster Consulting and Business Development Center. And this is really targeting more support for diverse businesses with information sessions, tools, and education for minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses. So those are 2 specific items where we have student engagements, really boots on the ground, and seeing what people need to know, what obstacles are out there, and where we can be more helpful to campus units on the topic of supplier diversity. The second item is the Supplier Code of Conduct. And the Supplier Code of Conduct is basically more targeted, as the name implies, to our suppliers. This document establishes our values and expectations for doing business with UW. And it says that we are going to conduct business in a socially responsible, sustainable, and ethical manner. We don't really have a mechanism right now for all of our suppliers to acknowledge it. So we are in the process of getting all of our suppliers to read, acknowledge, and state, hopefully learn what diverse businesses practices they have in place. So our goal here is that 100% of our suppliers will acknowledge the Supplier Code of Conduct by the end of this process. And then the third item, it's actually under accomplishments, but I would say it's something that's more ongoing and in progress. Establish a process to capture second-tier diversity spending. So for everyone's benefit, the second tier spending is the vendors to our vendors. They are not our prime suppliers. And we think there's a major opportunity to capture more diverse spending here that's already occurring in our supply chain. Right now, we don't have a good mechanism to track it. So we are going to do some outreach to our major suppliers. Right now, there's just over 60, Claudia, am I correct on that? Catalog suppliers?
Yeah, that's true. Thanks, Monica. Absolutely. So, and the supplier code of conduct is something that one of our interns is working on. So we have 2 interns, and both of them have been absolutely wonderful to have as part of our team. And the one is working on a supplier code of conduct, and the other has worked on the campus outreach and identifying obstacles that have challenged departments in identifying opportunities for doing business with diverse businesses. So we've really had good luck in having those students. Thank you, Claudia, for shaking your head, because student engagement is so important. And we've been so fortunate to have the support to actually fund those positions. I'd like to make sure that they continue.
Definitely. Thank you, Claudia. So those are 3, I think, big lifts, important projects, but I think at the end, they're all going to support, I think, just increasing awareness, and hopefully, ultimately, the ultimate goal is to improve our diverse spending and increase that number. So would be happy to answer any questions, solicit any feedback on your thoughts on these efforts.
This is Bruce. What is our policy regarding minority-owned businesses, procurement from minority-owned businesses?
So, hi, Bruce, I can take that. We don't have the ability to mandatorily purchase from a minority-owned business. However, there are state statutes where we are required to include a minority and a woman-owned business certified by the state of Washington when we issue solicitations for over a threshold. I can also add that from the federal perspective, when we receive federal contracts, not a grant, but a contract that's valued over $750,000, there is a component of the receipt of that contract where we have to develop small business plans. So there's mandatory goals to achieve. I mean, they're certainly aspirational goals, but we establish goals for spend with women-owned, disadvantaged, veteran, service disabled, and hub zone businesses when we receive those funds. And so currently we have about 40 federal contracts in excess of 750,000, and we report the achievement of those goals to the federal agencies.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions right now, I think we can move on. It looks like, I think, Claudia, I think you're doing target 5.
I am. Yeah, I think we're pretty good in terms of time, so we can go ahead and bank those at the end for questions and comments. So I'm reporting out on target 5, which is lowering our emissions from professional travel. This past year has certainly been a proof point on what we can do of not traveling to locations and reducing any greenhouse gas emissions by not flying. This has been a 2-part target. First one being led through Marilyn Ostergren, who has worked with faculty members who are on this committee, the travel office, purchasing and procurement, Bothell and Tacoma, and really understanding the baseline of our current air travel behavior. Marilyn's going to put into the link, or has just put onto the link, a wonderful database Tableau website link where you can start poking around and start seeing what we're doing as a university on our air travel. It's great, and I think this is the beginning of our journey to really delve into a little deeper on how we're going to reduce this once, as we see normalization of returning to campus, returning to our pre-COVID lifestyle. So the real essence of the past 9 months has been understanding where our information is and being able to establish grounding work to understand what the calculation is from a greenhouse gas emission measure, as well as the number of flights. No surprise that our travel number just dropped more than about 60%. You know, you just see this like cliff when you look at 2020 and into 2021. So, you know, that's a real opportunity to devise our approach in really encouraging, you know, when is it appropriate to travel and fly. We also have been working on a program to provide a voluntary way for some departments who have to travel because that's part of their work, to purchase carbon offsets from a broker, a verified broker, and doing so holistically for the university versus sort of one-off and kind of managing that. And, you know, the administration could get really messy. So for FY22, our actions are going to really target, I don't know why it's got 2 number ones. Sorry about that. Should be 1 and 2. So the first one is facilitating department unit specific travel reduction, looking at air travel data, but again, giving access to that, updating our reduction goal from 5%, because it seems like we could do more as we've seen the past year, to align with what the state's requiring for greenhouse gas emission reduction, 45% by 2030. And then what's going to be really key is communication around this. Why is it important? What can you do? Where does it matter? And we've been receiving really invaluable information related to this topic from our faculty and researchers. And then ultimately where we can is to have a recognition program of, you know, identifying practices that are models and can be good case studies for other departments to follow. So that's really on the reduction piece. And then joined at the hip will be looking at how do we offset travel related emissions. As I mentioned, there's a master contract with Act Commodities, which is a broker dealer that provides this greenhouse gas emission reduction verifiable in the market. So that there's assurance involved and verification of that, because it's not a sort of, you say you did and then everyone believes you. There's very stringent guidelines. But also to look at what we've learned the past year is an interest in an internal offsets program. Maryland has led a group to talk with other universities. So Cal State East Bay in California, they've actually created an internal one where all projects they do on campus go towards funding. They said we're going to be zero emissions and that's it, and we're going to be funding our projects directly. And so they've really redirected it towards their internal carbon reduction projects. So we can learn a lot from that process. But also there's opportunity here to, in doing both, is to outlining what our air travel emission could be to just, you know, by 2050 flatline. What does that look like, both from a carbon reduction, direct reduction to offsets when we can't control those emissions, as for example, with air travel. And again, not having some choices in the matter if it does warrant travel. So we know that there are ways that we can look at the data. Hillary, I think, just had some really great, some question there that I'm gonna, I think Marilyn can probably best answer in terms of the infographic. And this one too, using responsibly. Yeah, Hillary, that's a really good one. That's a good.
I didn't mean to distract you, Claudia. It was more just a correction.
I think that, and that makes sense. So I think it's also, decarbonization, absolutely, both. And maybe even other ones, research. I mean, campus is a living lab. There's certainly some potential here to look at some of the research happening at the UW right now, in looking at just, projects that would be, looking at carbon, social cost of carbon. I can think of a whole host of disciplines that could be interested in that. So those are really the two key foci this coming year for our air travel reduction. And we welcome any and all feedback. As I mentioned earlier, there have been two groups working on this now, really joined at the hip. And our faculty who are on this committee have been involved as well, even just from the get-go of planning. So is there anything else you'd like? Yeah.
You should start wrapping up a little bit.
Oh, okay. All right. Then I'm not going to ask if there's any other questions. So thank you. This was I'm really glad to share the update from the group so far. So yeah, please send on any other questions and comments that you have on these actions.
Okay, and let's go ahead and move on to Casey for the target 6 and food.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, or mostly good morning. I am here to talk about Target 6, which originally was focused on specifically and strictly the locality of our food and where it's processed and packaged from. And what we saw over the last year, in addition to sort of the challenges that we had because of COVID, which were pretty immense, was that this target in retrospect is a bit short-sighted. And that's because of what we have learned about the impact to greenhouse gases and what really the major contributors are. So based on the survey feedback that we received, as well as just the general feedback that I get from folks throughout the year, we wanted to try and revisit the core of the target and figure out how we could incorporate some more impactful changes into this. And one of the things that we decided and landed on was that we wanted to incorporate plant-based options into this target rather than just locality. All of the science is really telling us that as much as supporting your local food system is an incredibly important part of sustainable food systems, the greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with food are more significant when it comes to the type of food. So red meat has far higher greenhouse gas emissions tied to it than, say, the celery that I'm getting 500 miles away rather than 250 miles away. That said, again, I want to reinforce that the food from local sources is still very important. I think especially now, we want our source of food to be closer to where we're utilizing it so we can truly see the impact that has. So we decided to maintain the local sources portion of the target. However, what you'll notice is we removed that overall 35%. That's for a couple of reasons. One is because we frankly lost a lot of ground during the pandemic, and a lot of, or at least a fair amount of our local purchases unfortunately kind of fell off because of the pandemic, whether it was due to supply chain difficulty with the local company's staffing, the regulations and how it impacted business. And so if we had left that 35% overall as the target, we inevitably would have fallen short on it. We don't have the financial resources to increase that, because it would have resulted in a far greater than 1% year-over-year increase, which is what was originally spec'd. So alternatively, we decided to maintain that 1% year-over-year increase and do away with the overall 35% because it wasn't really aligned any longer. And so for that, some of the things that we want to look at specifically for that portion of the target this year is to continue to analyze our product purchases, but start to do so in a more targeted way from our primary distributors. So we have been speaking with our vendors and asking for by category holistic lists of vendors and products that come from within 250 miles of our location. And we are going to pick a category essentially each quarter and look for opportunities that we may have to shift spend from a vendor or area that isn't local to one that is local. In addition, we want to continue to expand the UW Farm programming. And I have the privilege of being on the UW Farm Advisory Committee, and I get to speak with Perry pretty regularly. So we have been trying to come up with creative ideas to put some new things on the shelf. One project that we are thinking of that would fall into this 1B area is doing a CSA box at the district market. So for those of you who have done the CSA with the UW Farm, you know it sells out incredibly quickly. And that's really a specific captive audience that they have. We want to make it a bit more accessible for students, and on the plus side, everything the UW Farm does is organic. So we're going to put together a mini sort of CSA program. We'll put them on the shelves, you know, once or twice a week. When they sell out, but it will be a variety box that gives students access to, you know, a variety of produce that's all organic, all local, and we'll be sure to really push the story behind that. Additionally, we want to continue to increase student engagement through vendor stories, tabling, and student information. The difficulty is we can purchase locally all we want to, but if there isn't a story behind it and there isn't information reaching the students about where these products are coming from, they're not going to change any behaviors and we're not going to see any shifts. So we are going to lean as much as we can into promoting these local goods, the UW Farm, and making sure that there's a lot of information behind it. So for us, that looks like continuing our UW food demos, which we use UW Farm produce for. We talk about the produce, the different qualities that it has when it comes from the UW Farm. And then we do our best to make sure that we then have those products on the shelves. And we make sure that those are the products that are used in the kits that are purchased. So that's sort of the existing plan that we had for this target. But as I said, we wanted to expand that for plant-based. And so we're looking at doing that kind of in two ways. One is to, and ours is labeled all ones as well. But what is the second one is that we want to just generally expand our plant-based options, particularly in our food service units, but definitely in our dining halls, because that's where we see the majority of the traffic outside of district market. And so in addition to that, we're going to tie a couple of metrics to this. So we will use a percentage of plant-based options from the total menu options available as one metric. And then we will also use the plant-based protein purchases as a metric. And we wanted to make sure we include both because there's a lot of different types of eaters out there. Some are flexitarians, some folks don't like meat analogs, some folks really stick, some vegans only want to eat whole foods. And so we wanted to make sure that we weren't just focusing on protein, but also general plant-based options. And by having those two metrics available, that will give us the opportunity to make sure that we're capturing both. And it aligns with some of the changes that we've seen in our STAR ASHE reporting, as well as the protein flip reporting that we do through the MCURC. So once we finish this season of reporting, we will use those baselines in conjunction with baselines from a quote unquote normal year, just so we can really understand the scope of progress that we have moving forward. And then lastly, to support all of this, we are going to collaborate with Dr. Yona Sipos at the School of Public Health to help increase engagement in some student-led research. So one big project that I have in mind that I'm super excited to work with students on is looking to apply greenhouse gas ratings to our different types of food. So what we would do is we would collaborate with Yona and the students in that class to work through our database of products, decide what intervals of metrics we want to incorporate, and essentially apply a low, medium, high greenhouse gas emissions rating to each menu item that we have. Eventually, we'll be implementing something called Net Nutrition, which is a customer-facing nutrition platform where you can select and view the food you want to eat and see the nutrition tied to that. So my hope is that we can take these ratings, we can upload into that system, and while students are trying to make choices to support healthfulness, for themselves, they will also be able to make choices that support healthfulness for the environment. So I'm really excited about some of these changes. I think we can make a pretty significant impact, especially with the combination of both of them. So that is what we're looking at doing for the next year. Are there any questions or concerns that I can address?
I think we're at time.
Yeah,
so
sorry, Casey, I just wanted to, sorry, Casey, I just want to make sure you could finish your last thought, but yeah, we're at time.
Yeah,
okay,
so
perfect.
Feel free, if people do have other thoughts or questions, feel free to add them to the chat, or as we said before, email Claudia and we'll pass them on to Casey. And we will move on to transportation.
Hi everyone, I'm Corinne Walleen with the Transportation Services, and I'm going to talk with you today about Target 7. Just some accomplishments that we've seen over the last year. One of the major things we did was develop a transportation needs assessment survey of the Seattle campus community to really determine what are the barriers and motivations for people using sustainable transportation options to campus, and using that information to help develop new strategies for us moving into 2028. As part of that needs assessment, we were able to also ask questions related to how people's travel behavior has changed due to COVID-19 and how they anticipate that will look once we are returning to campus. And one of the challenges that we really learned from that was that there are concerns with the health and safety of using sustainable modes, specifically shared modes like transit, carpooling, and van pool, both currently during COVID-19 and then as people are returning to campus post-COVID. Also learning from that people who have been teleworking or telelearning have really seen benefits from that in productivity and work-life balance, as well as the aspects of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And so one of the things that we're really looking at with our future actions is how do we respond to transportation options post-COVID-19. The other big piece that we spent time on this year was looking at how can we incorporate all three campuses, UW Seattle, UW Bothell, and UW Tacoma, into this target moving forward. For the work plan for FY21, the actions were really focused on the Seattle campus. And so we wanted to make sure that we were incorporating the good work that all three campuses are doing. And so then taking a look into actions that we want to take for fiscal year 22. The first is really actually updating the target goal so that it is capturing all three campuses, the 12% or less of commutes being single occupancy by 2028 is a UW Seattle specific goal, and really isn't a goal that can be met by the other campuses just based off of their access to sustainable transportation options such as transit. And so what we're looking to do is actually update the target to be reduce single occupancy commuting by 6% by 2028. That allows us to continue to incorporate the Seattle campus master plan goal of the 12% by 2028, because we are currently at an 18%. But this also helps incorporate for the UW Tacoma and Bothell campuses their Washington State commute trip reduction target goals, which is 6%. So that is one recommendation we're making. As far as draft actions, the first one that we're looking at is really how do we encourage sustainable transportation options and teleworking post-COVID. With the disruption of the typical commute for many of our employees and students, there's really an opportunity to look at how do we change people's travel behavior as they're returning to campus. And so some of the actions associated with that are UW Transportation Services will be tracking research on transit recovery, as well as disease transmission on transit, and sharing those findings with campus communities. As I mentioned, one of the primary concerns we were hearing for people returning to transit post-COVID was what does that look like for health and safety? So being able to talk about the fact that there are very low transmission rates associated with public transit with COVID. The second part of that would be developing an outreach and education campaign that promotes active and shared transportation options moving forward. And again, highlighting some of those pieces associated with the safety associated with transit. Continuing to promote telework arrangements for employees that are able to work remotely and partnering with our UW HR partners on that. And then continuing to advocate for increased transit service levels. A second action item that we're looking at is evaluating the expansion of daily parking options on the 3 campuses. Providing daily parking options to students, staff, and faculty can really encourage commuters to use sustainable transportation options on the days that they don't need to drive to campus, and can be a cost savings to employees that are using sustainable transportation options because they're not having to pay for parking on days that they're not parking on campus. And so for the Seattle campus, we're looking at expanding our current pay-per-use parking program to the S1 garage. And then for the Bothell and Tacoma campuses, both of them will be taking this year to evaluate their daily parking permit options and how to expand that moving forward. And then the third action that we're looking to take is to promote our UCAR and UW shuttle services for midday travel. So for people who are using sustainable transportation options, that they have access to resources that allow them to get to midday meetings or midday appointments. And so for both of those, we'll be developing a marketing plan and implementing a marketing plan so that employees, patients, and students are aware of those programs at their campuses. If anyone has any questions or comments.
There are a couple of comments in the chat currently in terms of the return to work, or excuse me, return to campus, and then also just some sustainability related issues. I was just responding to one of them. So who would like to pose a question? If
Yeah, just about 30 seconds for this topic, sorry.
Well, Karen, we would love to connect with you offline and hear about the narrowing of options. We actually feel like we've really blown the options up and expanded them enormously. So I'm so curious to connect with you offline and help explore problems you're running into. So thanks so much for putting that down. Corinne or myself will be in touch and we'll see where those barriers are for you. So thank you for saying something.
Okay, and I think we can forward some of the other comments on as well to see if there's anything else to be addressed, and we'll move on to target 8.
Great, thanks, Damon. Norm Mentor with UW Facilities. This is target number 8. Briefly, just to remind you of the intent of this action, we intend to decrease energy use intensity, which is measured by KBTUs of energy used in our buildings per gross square foot per year by 15% by 2025. We have 4 years to go. 2021 has been an exciting fiscal year, accomplishing projects. But we had a robust conversation with many of the people who are on this call today. So I encourage folks who have been involved in the planning for FY22 to join in the conversation and add to this presentation as they see fit. But basically the feedback fell into two categories. We have 2 draft actions that are carryovers from last year, action 1 and 2. And folks were just very encouraging to keep going and keep building on the momentum. Action number 3 is brand new and represents a common theme that I think we're hearing here this morning, which is greater level of connectivity and collaboration and outreach of our systems. This target is intentionally and necessarily an operational target, but over the past year, we've had great input and collaboration from faculty, specifically Jan Whittington helping us with the Green Revolving Fund and developing that concept into a real proposal that's ready at this point for provost review. But we want to continue that in 2 vectors, continuing better outreach and more connectivity to students and faculty, not just across campus, but across the tri-campus landscape. And then in a second vector, to make better connectivity and connections between the Seattle campus and the Bothell and Tacoma campuses. And that looks like increased levels of common reporting, use of similar tools so that our 15% energy use reduction can not just be a Seattle goal, but a tri-campus goal, and we'll be able to see our progress and our improvements across the entire landscape of the university. So that's the primary change, is developing this demand side management approach, as we call it, not only better reporting tools, but improving and increasing the campus's operational assets as opportunities for research and student learning through the campus as a living lab. So we're excited about that addition. And then finally, I'll just finish with a brief update on the 2 actions that are carryovers from last year. Implementing cost-effective energy conservation improvements in our buildings and our utility distribution systems has been a long-standing commitment of the university. We have struggled with funding. Last year, we completed over $1 million worth of improvements and have moved the needle on EUI on campus, on the Seattle campus at least, by almost 3%. But the problem being that 3% isn't fast enough. We will run out of time and we will not meet this goal by 2025 if we continue on this trajectory. So in 2021, we spent a fair amount of time developing a concept around a green revolving fund that can improve the focus and harvest the avoided utility costs that these projects capture, and reinvest those specifically into additional conservation projects so that we can increase our spend from about $1 million a year to over $3 million a year to potentially as much as $5 million a year. And we are poised, Lou is poised to move this forward. We're doing some fine-grained analysis of the financial model right now, looking at implications this will have on other operational business processes, especially in the financial reporting area. And we hope to have this green revolving fund approved certainly in the coming fiscal year, if not sooner. And with that, I think that's pretty much this action. I would say that this action strongly overlaps with action number 10 that Marilyn will discuss in a couple minutes. So we could have a conversation at the end of target number 10, and we can talk about both these very much interconnected targets if folks would like.
Sounds good. Let's go ahead and move on to action or target 9 then. Liz?
Hi, everyone. I'll briefly, so this is 10% less solid waste by 2025. We generally, the Seattle campus discards about 4,800 tons of material each year, a lot less last year, but not through our effort. So we are updating the infrastructure in buildings to make sure there's enough compost capacity, because we know the biggest impact to our garbage generation is compost being thrown away incorrectly. So we're making sure it's much more convenient to folks. And that goal will continue, or that action will continue through next fiscal year. And we have about 15 buildings left that we hope to update next year. And then as far as outreach, we've really bolstered our online and virtual outreach during the last year. So I've shared our website that's been redesigned and our online class that takes 30 to 45 minutes that anyone on the Seattle campus, anyone with a UW Net ID can take, but it is Seattle specific. But we've shared it with Tacoma and Bothell in case they can create something similar that's applicable to their campuses. And the other accomplishments are the huge efforts that UW Dining has taken to reduce the amount of food being discarded, either through overpurchasing or production, or during operations being reduced, making sure that food is being transferred to dining locations that are open, transferred to the UW food pantry or local food banks, and just making sure everything's being tracked very closely and saved for the best use possible for that material. So the draft actions, as I mentioned, are to continue to make access to composting extremely convenient for everyone on campus. We're going to be rolling out new outdoor containers over the summer, and then updating buildings as time allows. The next action is low waste campus kitchens. So last fiscal year, the focus was on UW Dining setting up a system for manual tracking. And for the next year, we hope to identify all dining locations that UW Dining doesn't oversee and provide the resources so that they can set themselves up to do the same process. And create some training materials so that all of the kitchens on Tacoma, Bothell, at the hospitals have some tools to reduce waste as well. And then our new action is to reduce single-use disposable items. And that's really primarily because of feedback from the surveys. We're very food waste focused because we know that's a huge part. It's about 1/3 of what we throw away. But we recognize that single-use disposable items are very visible and train folks to do the wrong thing. Instead of to reuse and reduce, we create habits of disposal. So we've added this, and over the last year, our student intern, Julie, who's on the call, has done a zero waste campus assessment for all 3 campuses and interviewed everyone that touches policies or waste. And so we're going to get a report from the Post Landfill Action Network, an organization that does these assessments, in the next month or 2. And then we're going to be figuring out what efforts we should take on during the next year. So figuring out what our priorities are. One big priority is going to be reducing straws and lids because of the new state bill that will go into effect next year, SB 5022, that will ban styrofoam food containers, which is very exciting. It's already banned in Seattle, but that'll impact Tacoma and Bothell. and also make all lids and straws on request only. So if folks need straws, they'll have them, but for the most part, we'll reduce the amount that we're giving away and throwing away. So I'm excited about that. And there are lots of opportunities across campus for reducing single-use disposables. Any questions?
I think I don't see any in the chat, and I think it'd be a good timing to move on to target 10, which it sounds like might need a little bit of extra discussion. So let's go ahead and do that.
And who do you want to start? Both Jan and I will be presenting for this one.
I think it makes sense for you, Marilyn, unless Jan, you're chomping at the bit and you got to go.
However you guys want to proceed.
Okay, I'll go ahead.
No, that's right. It's electrification's first. So.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks, everybody. I've been assisting UW Transportation Services. They know I'm sure Ann and the team can speak for themselves as well. But there's a plan in place, the bones of a plan in place to electrify UW Transportation Services. They've been working on it for quite some time and are really quite familiar now with the performance of various EVs on the market and compared to ICE vehicles. And so given that the UW fleet in general is comprised of approximately 700 vehicles, and they've already converted approximately 40 of them, close to 40 of them to EVs. And we're including in here the fleets at Bothell and Tacoma, so this is a tri-campus effort. But if UW Transportation Services is able to convert through its replacement cycle 50 to 70 vehicles, transitioning those from ICE to EV, as the price points for various vehicle types allow, as those vehicles come into the market, then we'll end up with a pretty complete conversion of the fleet to all electric in a 10-year period by 2030, 2031 or so, which is the target that we have in mind. And it is entirely possible on existing UW surface lots to install solar canopies that can meet all the needs of the EV charging. So we don't even have to consider this to be, and by the way, doing so actually reduces the cost of providing charging in comparison to purchasing that power directly from Seattle City Light. So we've done that analysis, and it saves the campus money and is a renewable option here. So that's the plan here, is to roll out the solar canopies, the EV charging stations, and in concert with the conversion from ICE to EVs over time. Do you want me to bump up to 3 and then come back to the big one too? What do you say, Marilyn?
Dan, can I ask a question? I don't know if you can talk now or maybe offline a little bit more about the process to kind of move forward and take the next steps with respect to funding sources and, you know, compelling decision-making on this.
Great question, and may want to pick this up as well. The Green Revolving Fund is implicated here because solar works well for the Green Revolving Fund, just like it does for resource conservation projects. But Anne, you want to comment?
Sure. I think we're just on the verge of pulling that together, Lou, relative to developing a small subcommittee associated with a Department of Commerce grant. What we're looking at is whether or not from some of our reserves in transportation, partnering with grant dollars in Department of Commerce to be able to, and then looking at the Green Revolving Fund of how then can we use those 3 fund sources to put together a plan that we can take to our capital project group that is overseen by myself and Barbara Wingerson, and then apply for green revolving fund dollars. We really believe we already have the data in place in terms of how much certain square feet of solar paneling for the canopy will generate for both the fleet and for ameliorating our transportation, at the very least, electric costs. So we're just, we have all the background information. We now need to put that in a scope document. We believe that we'll get some additional wisdom and help from Brian McCartan in terms of pulling that together, and then putting that in front of the capital planning group and saying, why not, relative to how we can pull that together. So we're, I think, on the cusp of something very exciting in terms of pulling all those pieces together.
Yeah, this is very exciting. I just wanted to level set and make sure we kind of brought back down to the practical side of things on how to implement things. If this is a green revolving fund source, I think we're on a really good path for the green revolving fund, which still needs to go through a process of getting approved and implemented, but we got all the right people involved and moving forward with a good plan. So
yeah,
thank you for that.
Absolutely. And we hope to coattail on the green revolving fund, but also look directly at grant dollars and TS dollars to get that. So we hope we have a three-legged stool here. The green revolving fund will just be phenomenally augmentive.
Yeah, we'll talk more about all that. There's impacts on all those funding sources that need to be thought through appropriately.
Yes,
but
and we're
doing it.
Absolutely, and we will go through all the appropriate approval processes for that to happen, and engaging asset management relative to developing a very specific project scope. So right now, this is moving from aspirational to boots on the ground scoping portion.
Yeah, that's where we really make things exciting. Thanks.
Okay, so Marilyn, I think thanks for that, Lou. Very encouraging. So I'd like to pop down to item number 3, implement campus solar plan, because there's not a lot to add here, because along with assessing the capacity for solar on the tri-campuses in terms of transportation assets, we've assessed capacity for solar on all the building rooftops for the campus. So our goal going forward, listed here as item number 3, the campus solar plan, is to review and approve a campus solar plan that the UW Solar RSO has created, and confirm available funding mechanisms for developing solar on those on-campus assets. Solar brings for every dollar invested in solar, the campus earns $1.30 back. So it is a financially beneficial and therefore not just a renewable resource, but a really nice component of the green revolving fund as well. As we develop it, we reap those benefits. So we'd also like to participate more directly with engineering services and other groups on campus to make sure that we have good up-to-date technical input on solar as part of campus guidelines for development. And then the plan going forward, because we could, if we are going to develop out our solar potential over the next 15 years, let's say, this would call for us to develop approximately 1 megawatt per year in rooftops and 1 megawatt per year on transportation canopies, because it is possible for us to actually receive from our own renewable assets, making money off of them. It is possible to receive approximately 10% of what we currently use on campus in our electricity through solar power, which is kind of cool. And that reduces peak load on campus, allows us to push off some of the really large expenditures that we would otherwise have to do with our grid ties with Seattle City Light. and allows us to get some more thoughtful planning on the big items. And speaking of big items, that's item number 2 in our action items.
Okay. So first of all, just this morning, we had a meeting about the new cap and trade bill in the state. And the bad news is it doesn't make our energy transformation cheaper. The good news, it makes it not transforming more expensive. So the finances are more compelling because we'll be hit financially if we don't transition. Okay, I'm going to jump to the second item under plan to repower the Seattle campus, which is an idea Dave Durante came up with, which is to conduct a planning summit to bring together stakeholders and really push through some of these decisions we need to make. The Energy Roadmap group has already started brainstorming how that will look, and we've started looking for a date, hoping this will happen end of June, beginning of July. So that'll be a gathering, a day and a half or so gathering of key stakeholders. And I'm hoping, some of you heard me say this before, I was at a Department of Energy summit a couple of weeks ago and came away from that feeling really clear about 2 things. And one is that we haven't yet ramped up our effort on this to the level it needs to do this big project. And I'm excited that this summit will be that, launch a bigger effort, get more people involved. The second bit of clarity is that it is totally possible to achieve this goal. And I feel like there's this sense on campus that this is so burdensome and possibly impossible. But at that conference, at the summit, there were so many people doing amazing things to achieve these, because there are new amazing technologies and also amazing financial mechanisms. So I really think the barriers have been broken down, and I think if we go in with this recognition and this attitude that we can do it, hopefully that will help us. Let's see, in the third one, when Dave wrote this originally, he said leverage the approach defined in this summit to fund required studies. He was thinking for a while that we needed to update some of the engineering studies we'd done. And then he told me, after reading through existing reports and realizing how much information we've amassed, he really thinks that another study is not going to get us where we need to go, but that we need to hire some consultants to help us with this. And we know from the RFI work we did last year that there are lots of people out there in the marketplace who can support us with this difficult, hairy problem. And then back to number 1. So I don't know how many of you know, we currently have a request for proposals, and we're doing the final choice about who will come in to spend $10 to $30 million on our existing plant, because we had some scary times last year, and we know that we really need to make sure that plant stays reliable. But the idea of putting that much money into the plant that we know we want to transform is pretty discouraging. We've talked at the Energy Spa about looking for any opportunity to spend that money addressing the needs, but doing it in a way that will move it forward. Over the next 3 months, the scope of that work will get spelled out. And from where I'm sitting, it feels like an uphill battle. It feels like there's a lot of pressure to keep the scope small and focus on the conservative approach. So whatever support we can get to say, look, and I know, Lou, you've expressed that if spending a little more money to do a little more study means we can find these truly innovative solutions that will meet all of our desired goals, that we need to be sure we're open to that.
Yeah, let me address that real quick.
Thanks, Lou.
We had a discussion actually this morning about that, and we're going to talk some more next week. I've got Joanne asking for a meeting with you and Norm in particular, just to kind of talk about where we're going in light of the position for the executive director for campus energy and utilities. So we'll talk some more next week, but I want to circle back on the RFP, and there's another meeting I think next week as well on that, where we'll talk about scope and the plan. And it's all good. Everything that you said makes sense, and the intent is to certainly not strand any capital if we can possibly do it. And what we talked about was the options that we may have in this process initially to, as we've talked about, look at the next step for, we've got to maintain the resiliency of the existing plant. Let's try to do it in the most productive way where we're not straining any capital and we're preparing for the future. So more to come, and we'll talk more next week, but I think everything you're saying is consistent and sound, and I understand the dilemma, and I wouldn't even call it a conflict, but the ongoing discussion. It'll be informed in the coming months when we have more information from the consultant on options. So I think, I'm just encouraged that we're moving forward, and this RFP process is the thing that will help chart our course for the next few years.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know how helpful that was, but just wanted to let you and Norm in particular know that we'll be meeting next week to talk some more.
Yeah, good.
Okay. I'm switching to my phone. I know we've only got a few more minutes, but sorry for the back and forth here.
And we've generally reached time that we had for the target presentations. Claudia, was there a little bit of time for extra questions, or do we need to move on to your part?
Yeah, I would like to spend 3 minutes just to cover, and then we'll use any time, I can hang around too for questions. So if we could I just want to share kind of what happens now. We've had some really active discussions on chat happening as we've been meeting. So Damon, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. I just want to share really what happens. Okay, so email and contact me for anything you have questions and comments and other thoughts on for these actions. We're hoping if you could do that by mid next week. And I'll show you why on the timeline. So I really just want to share really quickly. This year we did do a survey on our plan and just the targets to ensure that we're keeping this as broad in terms of awareness and participation. So this really is a result of that. We opened it in early February, had it open for 5 weeks. We got a little less than a couple hundred responses, but we doubled from last year, which is good. So the interest is there. Tri-campus distribution, and we just did a basic, simple rating of 1 through 5 in order of importance. And then next slide. Demographic data, we had a really just a good layout here. We know year after year we can do more in terms of getting more responses at Bothell and Tacoma, but respectively in terms of the proportion. Seattle always kind of looms, but hopefully next year we'll have just get those numbers up. And then the distribution of folks reached, we had just a little tiny alumni, they got the survey and responded, and primarily with staff, but nice to see an increase in faculty responses too, as well as students. So next slide will show just a timeline. As I mentioned, if we could get your feedback and comments by mid next week, we are going to be tying everything together and would like to present the final kind of coalesced version of the update. It's going to be a thinner document than our plan. The big one we did last year. These are updates. We'd like to present that for kind of final okay by the Sustainability Action Plan Executive Committee, June 17th. because our goal post here is July 1, is to have it published by July 1. So in our, as our framework lays out, we're doing these every year and having a updated annual plan for the new fiscal year. So so these are just dates to kind of keep in mind and on your radar. So with that, we have 5 minutes. And also thank everyone for just, especially our action leaders and teams who have been, they're the ones doing the driving. So if we were on campus, we would just, celebrate with ice cream or something. But we're not. So just thank you from our project team.
And I was just going to add one small note is, in addition to sending any comments on the targets and the actions presented here to Claudia, if there are, especially for the action owners, but everyone here, if there's any ideas on how to improve this process for next year, we know that there's, this was sort of the first year we went through this update process. We know there were some learning curves there, and we're, going to take a look at how to improve the process for the upcoming years. So if you have any thoughts on things that didn't work, places that we could really improve in terms of just how the whole process around communication and updates goes, send those to Claudia as well.
Yes, please. Okay, so we have any questions or comments that anyone would like to share? Open floor. Okay, a lot of smiles. I don't see anyone, no sad faces, so that's a good sign.
Good job, Claudia. Good leadership. Great process. This is no small thing, as I think everybody on the call will recognize, to update sustainability action plans on an annual basis. And I think that the process has been really robust and healthy and inclusive. So thank you for that, Claudia and team. I know there's a lot of folks, Christoph and
Colleen, yeah, everyone on department, really. And I'll take that little, is that Lucy, Norm? I'll take that as a good sign. Again, it's we're facilitating this, but this has been a collective desire, and we're really, this is kind of it's our work. So, we're all driving this.
So Claudia, I guess maybe we should adjourn the meeting and thank everyone for their participation today. And I also want to express my deep appreciation, and for the others, for the plan action owners and all the work that they have done and the teams that they represent. This is a significant undertaking, and it's the way to make our campus more sustainable. As I said earlier, this is our last meeting for this academic year. I want everyone to have a wonderful summer break. We all look forward to seeing the plan that's published on the 1st of July, and enjoy the summer. And thank you very much today. And I think that concludes our meeting.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, everyone.